Hey there, I'm Bailey Reutzel. I've been a journalist covering Bitcoin, blockchain, crypto, all of that since late 2012. Recently, my focus has been getting people hands-on with the technology because I think if they experiment with crypto tech and the adjacent technologies, they'll really start to understand why us crypto folks are so annoying at parties, constantly talking about this new decentralized future. One of those areas that's tough for people to really put into practice, though, is privacy. Most people can understand why privacy is important, for sure, but in practice, having it yourself is a bit complex. The thing is, privacy isn't this one-time process. It isn't an app you can download. It isn't a setting you can toggle. Retaining privacy takes constant work, and maybe even a rethinking of the paradigm of privacy. And so that's what our next speaker, Zooko Wilcox, is going to talk all about. Zooko has been thinking about these things for decades. He worked on PGP, DigiCash, a project that was the predecessor to BitTorrent, and for the past 6 years has devoted himself to Zcash, a cryptocurrency that includes the privacy-enhancing zero-knowledge cryptography. Zooko is currently the founder and CEO of the electric coin company, the pioneering force behind Zcash. So it is my honor to hand it over to Zooko Wilcox.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bailey. Thank you all for being here and listening. I like the part that Bailey said about how privacy in practice is like a chore or complicated or whatever, because I've been thinking about it for a long time and it's very complicated, but at the end of this talk in like 20 minutes, I think I have like a simple, easy, convenient proposal. Okay, so yeah, I'm Zooko. I've worked on all these different privacy technologies and user empowering technologies for decades now. And most recently, Zcash. Zcash is, from one perspective, it's a cryptocurrency, but from my perspective, it's a decentralized movement to make a fair and open money system for everyone in the world. And like any good movement, I'm not really in charge of it. There's a whole lot of Zcash that is going places without my, like they're doing their own thing. It's a big thing. So Zcash is awesome. And my purpose here is not to shill Zcash. I'm going to use it as an example. But my purpose here is I've been thinking about privacy, how it works for literally decades, since PGP and other things. I was one of the earliest Bitcoiners. And over the years and decades, it's sort of been gelling in my mind. I've sort of been thinking about it differently. And then during this last year, during the pandemic, working on Zcash, I came to like the last piece and I'm like, oh, now it's all starting to make sense. And so this is what I'm attempting to show you guys. So are my slides up? I don't see any slides.
Yes, they are. Go ahead.
All right. Is there any way I can see which slide is up?
If you look at the top of Zoom, you've got your Z1 program.
Oh yeah, I see it. Okay, thanks. Sorry for the technical difficulties between keyboard and share there. Okay, so here's the idea. So I've been thinking about privacy forever, and finally, after decades, and over the last year during the pandemic, I got the last piece into my head where I'm like, okay, now I think I can explain it. And it's very simple. It's privacy isn't a thing. Don't think about privacy. Forget it. Privacy isn't a thing. Instead, think about information leakage. And at first, you're like, okay, so privacy is the opposite of information leakage. Information leakage is the opposite of privacy, so who cares, whatever. But actually, when you think about it in terms of information leakage, a whole bunch of things start like making sense. It's a lot clearer, which I'm going to try to show you and see if it makes sense to you during a few examples. Now, the first thing that comes to mind for me is, you know what? Information leakage is not all bad, right? People like sharing. What I've come to is this concept of information leakage helps me separate between the concept of privacy as like minimizing what you share versus the concept of privacy as consent. Like if you want to share something private, intimate with someone to bring them into your life, that's great, as long as it's with your intent and your consent. So that's the first thing, is I'm not I'm not against information sharing. I'm just in favor of consent. But now I've got three technical concepts. So this is like deep tech stuff, but I think it's actually going to make sense to anyone, even if you're not technical. Okay. All right. Here's the first thing I've learned. You can't add privacy. So think about it in terms of information leakage. If you've got a system that your user is using, and one component of that system is leaking information about the user without their intent, you can't add another component and fix that because the toothpaste is already out of the tube all over the bathroom counter. So let me give you some examples from blockchain. So I work in cryptocurrencies and blockchains, and there's a lot of really wonderful advanced technology being deployed in that world. And it's often layered. There's a blockchain and you build on top of it. You can build apps and stuff for users to use. Well, what if L1 here in this diagram is leaking information about the user? A very common thing that I hear from people who are thinking about privacy as a thing, they say, well, we're going to add privacy. There's going to be a new feature in the next version, or people are going to build apps on top. Like there's a lot of people right now trying to build new layers or new apps on top of Ethereum to add privacy. And if you think about it in terms of information leakage, it should be clear to you why that's very, very difficult. Because if you try to add a privacy layer so that apps built on top can take advantage of privacy, but the underlying layer is already leaking the user's information, then the user's information is already out of the toothpaste tube. So what do? You build strong security into the foundation. And that's what we do in Zcash. Again, this is just one example, but Zcash is an example that if you have privacy built into the foundation, then actually things work. It's really interesting how things work the other way around. If you build strong control over information leakage into the foundation, then things built on top can choose to share information specifically with the user's consent. So if you build it in that order, the architecture is quite flexible. You can have both transparency and privacy built on top of a secure foundation. So that's the first lesson is you can't add privacy, so build strong security into the foundation. Next, what I've learned is that decoys don't solve the problem. Sending a note to the tech team. So in cryptocurrency specifically, we have this problem that you've got to make sure that money isn't getting double spent. So someone passes off the same money to multiple recipients fraudulently. And Bitcoin's breakthrough was we don't need to rely on some central controller to track everyone's money. Instead, everyone tracks everyone's money. So Bitcoin gave us decentralization at the cost of dramatic leakage of information. And so a natural approach that people tend to think of when they think about this problem is, okay, if we're leaking information, we're going to solve that by leaking even more information, but it's going to be fake. We're going to hide our human behavior among decoy traffic. And the problem with that is that when humans are involved, human behavior has patterns. And so those patterns are going to stand out. And I'll give you some examples. Here's a situation. There's somebody who's running a store that's very illegal and dangerous and is being viciously targeted by someone. Namely, they're running a store that sells sex toys in a regime that forbids that. So doing this is very dangerous for them. And they need to take money from customers, and they need to send that money or use that money by like depositing it into a bank or exchange at some point or using it somehow. Okay, this is the setup. So toys.sa is this web store that's secretly run by a guy named Bob. And Bob has an account at the bank or the cryptocurrency exchange. And he's got to make sure that the cryptocurrency exchange can't figure out that he is the owner of toys.sa. This is a very common real problem. This is not made up. This is the real world. All right. The concept of decoys is what you instinctively go to, and it can't work. And I can show you why by thinking about information leakage instead of thinking about privacy. So in this situation, Alice is buying something from the store, and she's using a specific kind of a specific payment, which is identifiable. There's information in there, which there has to be in order to prevent double spending in a cryptocurrency. And I'm going to use Monero as an example. I don't want to pick on Monero. It's the most widely used and the best implementation of decoys. And so I want to use it as an example to show you that even a good implementation of decoys doesn't work to solve this problem because of information leakage. So the thing is, the way it works in Monero is that when Bob deposits, sends a transaction to the exchange over there on the right, the transaction appears with 11 possible sources of the funds. One of those sources of the funds is the actual money from Bob, and the other 10 are randomly selected decoys to give like cover for Bob. Now, from the perspective of information leakage, you can already look at this diagram and you can say, you know what, there's a major, major problem here. This is very tenuous, fragile setup here, because that information that the bank is receiving about there being 11 possible sources of the funds, that's a lot of information. And at first, it's not obvious how that can be used against you. That seems fine up until the morality police show up and buy something from the store. So this Alice, it turns out it's not actually Alice, it's actually the morality police. They're going to buy something from the store, and then they're going to trace their own payment. So they know exactly which transaction, exactly which money they paid to the store, and they can see that that's one of the 11 candidates that showed up over at the exchange later. All right, so this is now this is looking pretty scary because now Bob's like in a suspicion set. Like he can say, no, it wasn't me, and maybe like I just got randomly picked. I'm just one of the 10 randos who got mixed in. But what happens if they go back and they make another purchase from the store? Another fake customer shows up, buys something. Bob deposits that over to the exchange. Now there's not a shadow of doubt left. The information leakage from the first transaction gets compounded or leveraged against the information leakage from the second transaction, and there's no other explanation. The morality police and the exchange are absolutely sure that Bob is running the sex toy store. Decoys can't prevent information leakage from getting leverage against you. So what does work? Encryption and zero-knowledge proofs work. Encryption was introduced to the world, like to the public, by Netscape in 1986. That was the beginning of the World Wide Web. It was the birth of the World Wide Web. And it was the first time in history that strong encryption was made available to everyone instead of just like the military. And zero-knowledge proofs were introduced by Zcash, by my team, 5 years ago, 2016. And but again, this is a general purpose truth. It's not specific to Zcash. When you use encryption, you're not hiding the information by trying to add more fake information. You're actually hiding the information by not disclosing the information in the first place. The toothpaste stays in the tube. Encryption works. Modern, strong encryption works. And zero-knowledge proofs work. So in a zero-knowledge proof system, I'm going to use Zcash as an example. It's not the only one. There are a whole crop of them being built now, including ones being built on top of Ethereum, like Aztec. But use Zcash as an example. It's the most widely used. It's the one I know the best for sure. So when the toys.sa store wants to send money to the exchange, a coin, a payment arrives at the exchange, and it comes with a zero-knowledge proof. The zero-knowledge proof proves that these coins, all the coins in this payment, were honestly mined, and they may have changed hands 0 or 1 or more times over their life, but they've never been double spent. That's all proven by the cryptography. And there's nothing else revealed. Not like in a decoy system where we try to add a few more things. Instead, in encryption and zero knowledge proof system, there is no other information shown to the exchange as part of this. And that's the zero in zero knowledge proofs. That's why zero knowledge proofs are one of the most important breakthroughs in the history of computer science, is because they reveal zero added information. So from the information leakage perspective on privacy, you can immediately say, oh, well, this is a much better situation to be in. Like, what if the morality police are making multiple payments to the store? And what if Bob is making multiple deposits to the exchange? Well, there's no information in common between those coins and those coins. It's just a proof that they're valid coins, but no information about what coins. So this does not leak in the same way. Bottom line, this is true of all things, all possible privacy technologies. Adding decoys doesn't work. Encryption and zero knowledge proofs works. Okay, last one. This is what I came up to during the pandemic, working on Zcash, not getting out as much, haven't done any conferences like this or travel in more than a year. And I realized something, which I think is another general purpose truth about any possible system, which is you can't add privacy to money in flight. Let me give you a few examples. Shapeshift was the most widely used service for years for people who wanted to exchange one kind of cryptocurrency for another. So you could bring in some Bitcoins and it would give you some Litecoins, and you could bring in some Litecoins, it would give you some Moneros and so forth. And during those years that Shapeshift was the most widely used service for this, one of the most common uses of Shapeshift, perhaps even the most common usage of Shapeshift for years, was what I've shown here. People would bring some Bitcoin to Shapeshift, like they bring 1.205 Bitcoins. And they would use Shapeshift to convert those into either Monero or Zcash. And then they would use Shapeshift to convert those Monero or Zcash coins into some new Bitcoin. And then they would be done. They would leave with 0.1205 Bitcoin. Actually, slightly fewer because of fees, but you get the point. Now, from the information leakage perspective, you can look at this and you can say, wait a minute, I see a problem. Do you see it? It's apparent that these people were trying to add privacy to their money in flight by what they were doing here. And also, from the information leakage perspective, you should be able to look at this and say, I see why it didn't add privacy like they thought it would, And that is their user behavior of taking 0.1205 Bitcoins and doing something to them and ending with 0.1205 Bitcoins, that already leaked the information about them. The toothpaste is already on the bathroom counter. And it doesn't matter what Shapeshift, Monero, or Zcash do to try to help. The best thing that Shapeshift, Monero, and Zcash can do in this situation is don't leak more information about your user. The best thing it could possibly do is leak no added information about their user. But even if Shapeshift, Monero, and Zcash succeed at that and they leak no added information, it doesn't matter. The information that was already leaked by this behavior is already enough to link their money. So they attempted to add privacy to their money in flight and it didn't work because of the information leakage. So what does work? Well, let me put it like this. Doesn't this same, I'm going to rewind my slides here. Click, click, click. Doesn't this same argument apply to a zero knowledge proof system? I said there's no information being leaked when you get paid in zero knowledge coins and you deposit into the exchange with zero knowledge coins. But actually, doesn't the same argument apply as with Shapeshift? And the answer is yes. So if Bob running the toy store, if Alice buys something for 0.1205 Zcash and then Bob deposits 0.1205 Zcash into the exchange, then yes, that's information. And even if Zcash in the middle does the best possible job of leaking no additional information, it's too late, right? And then of course, if the other fake customer comes along and buys something for 0.098 and then Bob deposits 0.098, it's really like case closed, right? So what's the answer? Is it possible to have privacy in blockchains? And to what Bailey said earlier, is it like a struggle? Is it like trying to outwit Deep Blue at chess or whatever, or is it simple and easy? So I have a proposal. The answer is you can't add privacy to money in flight. Privacy comes from shielded money at rest. Shielded is the word we use in Zcash, but in general, I mean like a zero-knowledge system that does not leak any information about the user. Put your money into that zero-knowledge system that doesn't leak any information, and you leave it there. So Alice buys something for 0.1205 Zcash, it goes into Bob's wallet, his shielded wallet. Charlie is like trying to like catch this guy. So he buys something for 0.098 Zcash, and that goes into Bob's shielded wallet. So no information got leaked yet. Now it's okay if later you can use your money. Bob can later decide, well, business is good. I need a new couch. So he can take 0.05 Zcash out of his wallet, his shielded wallet, and he can cash out to the exchange. But when he does that, there's not any visible linkage. His human behavior in the shielded wallet is what's protecting him. There's no linkage between the fake purchases from the morality police and what the exchange sees. Okay, so that's not hard. You don't have to try to outwit the morality police. You just have to, there's two things you got to do. A, use encryption and zero-knowledge proofs, not decoys. Because encryption and zero-knowledge proofs do not leak information, decoys leak information. And B, you've got to have your shielded money at rest. You can't add privacy to money in flight, but if you use a shielded wallet to hold your money, you get privacy. Okay, recap. I've started trying to say to myself, privacy is not a thing. I'm not going to ever use the word privacy. I'm going to re-say the whole sentence with information leakage instead. First thing is, that shows me that I care about consent. I don't care about minimizing sharing. I like sharing, but only consensually. The second thing is, you can't add privacy because you can't unleak information. So you can't add privacy. So you got to build strong security into the foundation from the get-go. The second thing I've learned is decoy, or third, where I've lost count. But the next thing I've learned is this is a really good way to understand why decoys don't work, because there's still information in there. That information can get leveraged. But encryption and zero-knowledge proofs, they do not leak the information, so they work. And the third thing I've learned just recently during the pandemic, I've come to think you can't add privacy to money in flight. The most common uses that everyone's been trying to do forever, it's the wrong idea. It can never work that I'm going to do something and add privacy to my money. But fortunately, there's a simple answer. You do get privacy from shielded money at rest. That's what I've learned. So thank you so much for listening.
Hey there, everyone. I go dropped off. Hopefully we get back.
I'm back.
Yeah, okay, great.
What was the last thing you heard? Should I say it all again?
No, we heard thank you. So that was perfect. Perfect timing for
Perfect.
you. I just, I want to ask a couple questions, having heard that. The first one, and I think, look, this is like harmless trolling in all of crypto when people are asking about the price and sort of win moon, but I think it gets at a broader question. So especially as governments and law enforcement officials around the world are sort of voicing their concerns about privacy coins, which has led some exchanges, Shapeshift and Bittrex, for example, to delist those coins. I think the broader question is, where are privacy coins placed in the market today and into the future?
In the market? I know a lot about these topics of delistings. I work on that. It's one of my main jobs, is to help regulators, law enforcement, exchanges, banks, etc., understand the laws and how privacy works and how technology works. And we've been very successful at getting Zcash specifically listed on a lot of highly regulated exchanges like Coinbase and Gemini. But in the broader perspective, you're asking about the market. And my answer is, I'm not like an investor or a market expert, but my answer is that what matters is the users and the people. Privacy matters, and people know that now. People care. And so in the long run, that's more valuable to people to give them something that lets their intent and their consent be respected over their own personal lives. That's got to be valuable. It's got to be helpful to them. So anyway, that's not exactly an answer about the market. I don't 100% know how markets work, but I know that that matters, and that's why we're doing it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, so that brings me to sort of, it's something we've talked about before as well. So if you keep in mind this concept of consent as it relates to privacy, and you had mentioned sort of a sex store, so I'm going to use that example as well, or like a sexy example as well. But so the easiest way I want to talk about revoking consent. So for instance, if someone sends a nude to their boyfriend and then those two break up, the idea is that the person doesn't expect necessarily that their ex will delete that photo, but they do expect some of the things that they could have done with it to be limited, right? And so I'm wondering, how do you revoke consent once you've already given it in terms of this privacy framework?
Mm-hmm. All right, so the privacy framework is, let's think about information leakage instead of about privacy. And in that framework, when you tell someone something, you can't untell them, you can't take it back, but you can ask them to respect how they use it, right? So what it boils down to is that the use case you have of revoking consent about something that you've previously shared, that's not something that can be enforced by computers technologically. So we're going to have to rely on the honor and the goodwill of our fellow humans to say, that thing I told you, would you please? And I'm saying a thing you told someone is, in computer information theory terms, a thing you told someone is basically the same as a picture. It's just information in information theory terms. So you've got to have, you've got to rely on the honesty and the good behavior of others, that they respect how they use information you've previously told them. There's no technological solution to that.
Yeah, I want you to start working on that though, Zooko, the technological solution for that, because it's hard to trust folks. And we've seen big corporations sort of take our consent to our data and misuse it in various ways. And so that's what I'm really worried about in this.
Yeah. There's combination technology and social human factors like norms, right? You can combine those two and you can go a long way. But I don't think there's ever going to be like a technological solution that can make it so that someone cannot use information badly after you've already told them. But we can make some progress. But I'll take it to heart. I should be working on that. Got it. I agree.
Thank you. Just a little idea from the audience. Okay, and so one other thing I wanted to touch on is, I think that something that keeps people from sort of going through this process of figuring out how to be private in this digital world where we're all sharing all this information is sort of this cost benefit analysis that probably happens pretty unconsciously, really. But so take, for example, if I buy $100 worth of marijuana, and okay, in a state where that's not legal, this is maybe a little outdated, but so I buy $100 worth of weed.
You rebel.
Are the secret police looking for me as sort of that low and seeing that I'm not the drug kingpin? They're probably not. And so I'm like, well, maybe it's not that big of a deal if I don't have privacy. So I guess, how would you respond to that?
Right. I think that's an excellent question. And I think I agree with you that most people think about it in those terms. And I think there's a really huge reason in the evolution of our society why that's a mistake. And it goes like this. 25 years ago, there was no mass automated surveillance, right? And at that time, people could say, and did say quite reasonably, nobody's spying on me, nobody's tapping my phone, nobody's following me in a car because I'm not a target. And that was accurate, okay? Well, guess what? Everyone's now a target, right? Because automation makes it cheaper to target everyone than to target specific people. Okay, so surveillance is now ubiquitous on every single person, regardless of their background or what they do in their life or if they smoke marijuana. Okay, that's happened. Now, what people are not realizing yet is that the next step is mass automated enforcement. Now that the information is being collected and processed by AIs, and I can give you some examples of how this is starting to happen with like sentencing AIs and stuff like that. But I think over the next 20 years, but hopefully it won't happen. We'll be able to head it off, but it could start happening fast. It's already starting to happen fast in China, which is where everybody, regardless of your background, regardless of what you're doing or how important what you're doing is, you're getting not only monitored, but also punished or constrained by the AI. That's happening in China right now. And the only way out is the politically connected who can get like exempted out of the AI. But all the rest of us, especially the least advantaged of us, are suddenly find ourselves in a virtual cage.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it's something that I do think consumers or users are going to start seeing more and more of. So yeah, I think that's a fair point, and everybody should be thinking about privacy. Just one last question. I just wanted to ask where you all were at in terms of the ECC moving to a nonprofit form.
Oh yeah, so ECC is a company. So I said at the beginning that Zcash is like a movement, and that's also its origin. Like I'm the CEO of the company, and it's very corporate of me or whatever, but that's because when we started this, we were like, okay, how are we going to make this thing global, decentralized, like well supported, easy to use, widely understood? And we said, okay, well, we need a company. We need a for-profit startup with a whole bunch of like hard charging, brilliant engineers and designers and marketers like hammering on it day and night. So that's where that company came from. But the whole Zcash movement was always larger and is still much larger. Like it's probably like my company does like about a third of the, like we spend about a third of the money, for example, that is used to improve Zcash. What was my point? Your question was about switching to a nonprofit. So it's a really interesting story, and I'll try to hurry because we're short on time. The Zcash community as a whole said, we are going to allocate money out of the blockchain to spend on improving Zcash. This is what I think is one of the most promising long-term strategic advantages of Zcash, is that it's self-funding. So that makes it resistant to being captured or like undermined by the fact that there's no money available to support it. Like if that's the case, if there's no money available to continue supporting and improving your thing, then your thing is vulnerable to someone who has the money coming along and taking it in their own direction. Okay, but Zcash funds itself. So the Zcash community said, we are going to allocate a bunch of money to fund improvements and support for Zcash, but you have to convert to a nonprofit. So that's how we got started. Looks like our time's up. I could go on forever about how that works. It's fascinating.
Yeah, cool. Thank you so much. It was so nice to hear your presentation, Zooko.
Thank you, Bailey.